a lot of times when we take something in a supplement form instead of the whole food, we get certain, quote, pharmacologic action from it that might not be desirable. So when you take something in nature that's a whole food, a lot of different chemicals coexist in that food. And that balance and blend creates that healthy reaction and response. When you isolate one little component and you give just that, there are many, many examples of where that actually produces a potentially detrimental impact in another area that was unwanted.
I just don't like when people sell something that makes people waste their money and also prevents them from going to a doctor. That part is what really bothers me the most.
This is Fat Science, a podcast dedicated to the science of why we get fat. No diets, no agendas, just science that makes you feel better. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended to replace professional medical advice.
I'm Dr. Emily Cooper. I've been treating patients with metabolic issues for over 25 years. I'm on a mission to raise awareness about metabolic dysfunction and why diets don't work.
Hi, I'm Andrea Taylor. I've been fat, very fat, chubby, morbidly obese, and done almost every diet ever invented. They all worked until they didn't. I've known Dr. Cooper forever, but when I became her patient and we learned metabolism was the real problem, wow, everything changed, and I've never been healthier.
And I'm Mark Wright. It's time for Fat Science.
Wait, does this podcast make me look fat?
Welcome to Fat Science. I'm Mark Wright along with Andrea Taylor and Dr. Emily Cooper. It's great to see you two.
Hello.
Hi.
So, on the show this week, metabolic supplements. Oh my gosh. It seems like everywhere you look, someone is trying to sell you a supplement to save your memory, to speed up your metabolism, to improve your mood. Supplements are everywhere. And we're going to talk about supplements that claim to be good for your metabolism in this episode. Dr. Cooper, let's set the baseline, though, for when we talk about supplements, we're not talking about things that need a prescription from your doctor. What is considered a supplement?
Well, supplements are sold throughout the country without any kind of FDA regulation. And that's based on some laws that were passed a long time ago that people didn't want the FDA interfering with their vitamin C and things like that. So there's a lot of free reign in the supplement industry to produce all kinds of compounds and products and sell them to consumers directly. And one of the biggest issues is because they're not regulated by the FDA, we're not really sure always what's in them, what they actually contain. So one of the problems with supplements is that whatever's listed on that label, that may not actually be what's in the supplement pill that you're taking. And what's in the supplement pill may not actually be listed on the label. So this is one of those big concerns because we have no way to really regulate that industry.
I am a sucker for packaging and labels because sometimes I'll be in, there's a sort of fancy supermarket that pretends to be healthy called Erewhon here. And they have beautiful supplements and beautiful vitamins and everything will fix everything about you. And I'll be like, wow, this one is really going to fix all my problems. Now, I am very lucky because I have Dr. Cooper and I will call her or during an appointment, I'll say, what about this? And she's like, what the hell is that? That is nothing. That is just a bunch of hooey. And I'll go, but it was so pretty in the bottle. She's like, yeah, that's all it was. And then, and some things will be like, she's like, that is just like, if you eat a banana, you're like doing the same thing or whatever it was, you know. Most times her answer is, if you eat beans or if you eat something, it's the same thing. But what really bothers me the most is that because I'm on Instagram a lot, I will see all these things from so-called scientists or so-called doctors who I don't know who they are, but they look really pretty. And they're selling all this stuff that says they're going to fix you for the rest of your life or they purport to have science behind it. And I mean, I think we were talking earlier about the latest Kardashian GLP-1 pill. And that one really bothered me. And it has nothing to do with the fact that it's a Kardashian thing. I have nothing against them or whatever. But what bothered me was that the way it was marketed basically said that if you take this pill, it's just like taking Ozempic or it's just like taking Manjaro. And what upset me the most was not that they're selling something like that, but what, like, people will think, oh, I don't need to go to a doctor. I just need to like buy this pill and I'll be fine. And I can take it for a little while. And there was then a follow-up article in the New York Times that kind of said some of the claims that they made. Yeah, I think Dr. Cooper will talk about it in a little bit, that yes, it had some properties that were equal to their claim, but if you kind of ate a healthy diet, it would kind of be the same thing. But I just don't like when people sell something that makes people waste their money and also prevents them from going to a doctor. That part is what really bothers me the most.
Yeah, I read that New York Times article, Andrea, and the Kourtney Kardashian supplement company is I think it's Lemmy, Lemne.
Yeah.
And it's over $70 a month for this pill that they're calling like the nature's GLP-1.
Nature's GLP-1, yeah.
And all the experts interviewed, Dr. Cooper, in that article say that they'll take compounds that have some properties that are beneficial, and then they'll blow those way out of proportion to say it's just as good as the prescription drug. So I'd love your perspective, Dr. Cooper, on this, because people are spending significant money to take these things that they think are just as effective as the prescription medication.
Without going to a doctor to see what's wrong with them.
Right. Well, and I think the supplement industry in general, that's kind of a theme with the supplement industry, is that there may be some science behind something, and then that little kernel of science is blown up in terms of the claims maybe that they're making for that particular compound. And then it's recommended to a mass consumer base.
Who's vulnerable.
Yes. And right. And so that's one of the issues where that's kind of how supplements are formed. It's big business. It's billions and billions of dollars every year. And there are buzzwords that they're looking at. And of course, this is coming out now because GLP-1 is a buzzword. So you'll see some that the buzzword was leptin, or it was insulin, or it was something, glucose, something that's in this area where that buzzword is now part of the marketing. And so when people see that word, they think it's got to be good because I'm hearing all these positive things about, for example, GLP-1. But the funny thing is that, I mean, even eating pistachios increases your GLP-1, eating whole grains increases your GLP-1, eating fruits and vegetables increases your GLP-1. So it's taking something and kind of blowing it really out of proportion. So this is based, I think, I didn't read the New York Times article, but I did look at what the supplement is. And there is science that says that taking bioflavonoids in general, which this one I think comes from lemon peel, but in general, these bioflavonoids can, the thinking is that they reduce the activity of an enzyme that breaks down our own GLP-1. So they don't necessarily make us make more GLP-1, but they break down an enzyme so our GLP-1 can last longer. But it's a very small, they talk about these big percentages, but if you look at the numbers, it's really tiny shifts in that hormone that they were seeing. And in the actual studies, there was no difference in body weight over 12 weeks. There was no difference in appetite. People ate the exact same amount of calories, had the same body weight. And one of the concerning things is in the biggest study, there was definitely an increase in triglyceride levels taking it. So I don't know why that was the case, but I think people should be made aware this could increase your triglyceride levels. So again, a lot of times when we take something in a supplement form instead of the whole food, we get certain, quote, pharmacologic action from it that might not be desirable. So when you take something in nature that's a whole food, a lot of different chemicals coexist in that food. And that balance and blend creates that healthy reaction and response. When you isolate one little component and you give just that, there are many, many examples of where that actually produces a potentially detrimental impact in another area that was unwanted. So I think using supplements as a pharmaceutical is not really a great idea unless you have a provider, a healthcare provider who has chosen that as part of your overall plan for you, including which brand they want you to take, or really researching the dose, the brand, because since it's not regulated, the truth is, in most cases with supplements, it can be marketed as containing X milligrams of something, but there can be a wide variance pill to pill in what the actual strength is. So not just the ingredients could be not what's listed or something that's unlisted, but also the strength of it might be a mismatch with what it says is in the pill, because again, not being regulated, we don't really know. And then also in clinical trials, when you have actual pharmaceutical drugs, they're looking for adverse effects. They're not just looking for, does something move this one blood level? They're looking to see, well, how does the person respond in terms of side effects, potential adverse effects, such as this triglyceride issue, liver toxicity, kidney toxicity, all of that, and toxicity thresholds. That's all missing in the supplement industry. So with things like that particular supplement, for example, or any others that are marketed as increasing your GLP-1, well, it would be safer to just focus on your diet and just get the foods that we already know improve our gut microbiome, that improve our own natural GLP-1 response. And there's tons of foods that do that. Now, would that help somebody who actually has metabolic dysfunction and obesity? Not necessarily in terms of, it's great to do because it's healthy in so many ways, cancer prevention, heart disease prevention, but it's not necessarily going to make them lose abnormal amounts of weight gain that they accumulated, or it wouldn't necessarily correct that. And so, because as Andrea pointed out, that's real dysfunction can be very powerful. And that's why pharmaceuticals are needed in that area. If it was something that was so easily solvable by diet, we wouldn't be in this situation, because you can't say that everyone who's experiencing obesity and diabetes, they're following an unhealthy diet. It's just not true. And everyone who doesn't have diabetes and obesity is following a healthy diet. And that's not true.
Not true.
So, right. And so that's the thing. It's just marketing these supplements as a magic bullet. And I'm not sure what their marketing is, but I think it said that it decreases appetite, and it doesn't on the scientific studies that were published. I didn't see that. I saw they did a good job of just having people eat ad lib, whatever they wanted, and measuring their food intake. And it really didn't change. The composition didn't change in terms of carbs, fats, protein. Calories didn't change over a 12-week period with any of the dose strengths they used. So you've got to watch out for marketing and quality of the supplements.
Yeah.
Well, you have to even understand, like, if you take like a probiotic, when you go to the store to look at probiotics, there's some that have 3 million whatevers, and then there's another one right next to it that has 3 billion whatevers. So it's like, okay, which one? And some are in the refrigerator and some are not in the refrigerator. So it's obviously there's a very big swing in what's what.
Yeah.
There is.
And we should talk about why the supplement industry was so adamant about lobbying Congress to not regulate supplements through the FDA. And the reason is, Dr. Cooper, is that you've mentioned this on previous episodes. The way that you test things is through a placebo-controlled double-blind study, which means that you have to take a fake drug and the real drug and give it to people who don't know what they're getting and study it over time. Those types of studies cost millions of dollars to execute. So these supplement companies are reaping the financial benefits of something they claim acts like a medicine, but in no way is regulated like a real medicine is. And real medicine is tested so that they actually know it's doing what they claim it can do. Otherwise, it doesn't pass FDA approval. It doesn't work.
Right. Yet we take it.
Exactly.
We
Yeah.
take them like they're medicine.
Yeah.
Yep, that's true. And I know years ago, the Japanese government funded some very rigorous studies on the naturally occurring anti-diabetic plants and products that were just native to Japan. And that was amazing because a lot of really good science came out of that because they published these research studies that were just like the pharmaceutical industry studies on various different naturally occurring plants that were endemic to Japan. And so long ago, I accessed that, and that gave me more confidence in that area. And I learned a lot about what those actions are because there was so much more detail too in those studies. But I mean, we like having access to supplements because they can be very helpful, but they really are only helpful if they're very targeted to that individual and if there is some guarantee of the authenticity of the supplement, that it is what they say it is. And that's not always the case.
How do you know?
Well, there are some certification processes. There's something called the Good Manufacturing Practices, is what it's called. And that is actually recognized throughout the World Health Organization, and different countries have different standards. But it means that the lab where the supplement is being made, or the factory, it meets what's called good manufacturing practice guidelines. And so that really is pretty rigorous in terms of producing. So it still doesn't say anything about whether it works or it doesn't work, whether there's adverse effects or there's not adverse effects. But what it does do is help feel more confident that what it says on the label is what is in the pill. So now, as far as the strength of the pill matching and pill to pill variance, I'm not sure how far that goes to guarantee that. But if you look at your supplements and see if it has something called a GMP stamp on it, that's a good sign that the supplement company can't use that stamp if they don't meet that GMP criteria. And they can provide you with the certification that they received from Good Manufacturing Practices. They have to enroll in the program. I'm sure it costs them something. And so that means that the factory where it's made is up to FDA standards for the manufacturing of the supplement. So they have to keep records and they have to do their own testing to make sure that it is what they say it is and all of that. But again, it doesn't tell you anything, even if you have that stamp, about potential side effects, potential risks, whether it's effective or it's not effective. It doesn't tell you any of that.
What I thought was interesting, Dr. Cooper, as you've treated me over the years, and we should say that you are not anti-supplement, because in my regimen of drugs and things that I take to regulate my metabolic syndrome, I take a couple of different supplements that you've recommended. I'm not going to name them by name because I don't want people to go out and just take them because.
Right.
But I'd love for you to explain the rationale and the thinking behind that. As you've explained it to me as a doctor to patient, you've said these things are going to reinforce what some of your other drugs are doing. And I'd love for you to explain that philosophy better.
Yes, because foods are wonderful, but there are certain foods we don't necessarily even have access to in our diet in our area. And there are certain food components that the concentration of some of these potentially pharmacologic elements are too weak in the food to really produce like a reaction that we want that will come closer to a medical pharmacologic reaction. And so there are times where we do want that. And certain of our, well, first of all, you have to always remember that every single medicine, practically almost every medicine, not all of them, but almost every medicine came from something in nature. It was first discovered by civilizations that that look really to nature to solve and cure disease in their communities. And these could be in certain areas of the world, especially for diabetes and obesity. South America is a hub for natural elements there that have been found to have medicinal properties. And so this is where actual pharmaceutical companies send researchers and scientists down to these places to talk to the communities there about what they're noticing. So that's something really fascinating about our industry, because we think of pharmaceutical industry as just concocted in a lab. But actually, there's a lot of interaction with civilizations that have been using ancient, naturally occurring plant products or even animal products sometimes that contain things in them that have been shown to influence the disease in their community. And so that's like the first clue that maybe there's something in there that could be developed into a pharmaceutical drug. And so most of our things in it, like metformin, is from a plant originally in that goat's rue family. And the GLP-1s, originally it was the lizard saliva or venom or whatever. Yeah, it's true. And so and also they're also mimicking our own body's hormones. And so things in nature are what we mirror our pharmaceuticals after, and we just make them more refined so that we can get rid of potential unwanted effects and accentuate beneficial effects. So there are things in nature that we want to add to our pharmaceutical array that have similar action, but at a much milder level. And usually they're tolerated better as well in terms of like GI tolerance and tolerance throughout the body, but not always. Supplements can also have a lot of side effects that make them intolerable. But again, it has to be thoroughly researched. So every supplement that I would prescribe, I have looked at the double-blind studies, or if they are available. Sometimes they're not available, which kind of does bother me. But you look then for toxicity studies and just make sure that it doesn't seem to be anything that could produce any toxicity. And of course, we monitor our patients really closely. So we would see if we're potentially noticing anything with any organ function changes and things. But some of these, if they're supplements, and I use them that way, I do call them in a way a medication, but some of them have very similar properties as the prescription medication. And so, as you said, Mark, they can sometimes boost the impact of the prescription med, or if the prescription med's too strong, but you still want that action, the supplement's milder. And so you can use that.
Let's talk about everybody's favorite, the fat-burning supplements. We've got the caffeine, we've got the apple cider vinegar, we've got, I don't know, there's 8 million pills that somehow can dissolve the fat. What do we think about that?
Well, I think, again, this is a particularly important area to focus on, because when they've studied these supplements and the authenticity of what's in them, those in the weight loss category were the most culpable. I mean, though that's an area where they even found pharmaceutical drugs in them. They were responsible for more emergency room visits for side effects than any other category of supplements. So we have to be really careful of anything marketed as a weight loss or also athletic performance type supplement.
Oh, yeah.
That those categories are known and notorious for being laced with adulterants that can be even prescription medication. So it's really, really important, again, to look for the GMP certification if you are going to take anything, but talk to your healthcare provider about the effects of it as well. And one thing to keep in mind is if you look at a supplement and there are 100 different ingredients, how likely is it that all of those ingredients are going to be beneficial in your body and not cause a problem? I can tell you one thing. When I prescribe supplements, I never prescribe anything that's got multiple things in it. It's one single thing that we're looking for, not a whole combination and slew of things in there, because it's just so unlikely that all those things have been studied well enough to know that they don't have harmful impact or that an individual actually needs every one of those things for their body. So I'd be really suspicious of supplements that contain multiple ingredients, because I think that's a marketing thing as well. The more this supplement has 30 different herbs and this supplement has 5, this must be better because it's got 30. So that's another marketing issue. So I don't think there's a magic bullet with these supplements. I hate to sound very boring on this, but
Oh, come on. No, but Dr. Cooper, like let's just go through the list of the quote unquote fat burning supplements. So caffeine is in everything now. The energy drinks and just all kinds of foods are loaded with caffeine now. Caffeine obviously makes your heart beat faster.
Right.
Does it stand to reason that you're burning more calories if you have caffeine?
Not really, because one thing that caffeine does that can be a problem is it stimulates the liver to dump out that stored carbohydrate.
Oh.
And so you might get a little rush of glucose when you do that and feel a little energetic. But the problem is if you don't eat regularly, then it's going to be followed by those glucose crashes. And so it can dump that glucose out, but then now you don't have enough stored glucose.
Oh.
So it can throw you into irregular, glucose swings. And so
that's interesting because back when I was doing morning shows in television, if I had 3 or 4 or 5 cups of coffee in the morning, I would hit this like crash point where I just had no energy.
Yes.
And wow, that's interesting that I didn't realize that it could
it does
cause
that
glucose
and
levels to drop.
That's why it's important to have breakfast too, because when you have a cup of coffee in the morning, because overnight our liver glycogen stores have depleted to a large extent and we need to retank it up. And then you put the caffeine in and it just like dumps out whatever's left. And then you're depleted. So,
okay, let's move on to some others. Green tea extract.
Oh, that's a big one. I see that all the time.
Yeah, claim that it helps burn calories and reduces the fat absorption. Is there any science to?
Well, green tea does have a lot of beneficial health properties. So does white tea. It does have, there's something in it, EGCGs, and that's like a component of the tea. And it does have some anti-diabetic properties. It does have some impact on preventing blood sugar excursions and keeping the blood sugar more balanced, can have some anti-cancer properties. So again, if your doctor feels that green tea is an important part of your regimen, you have to look for that GMP certification and understand what type of green tea should it be. Should it be high in those EGCG component, or does that not matter in your case? So again, if you're using it now as a medication, you really need to speak to your healthcare provider about whether it's appropriate in your situation, because there may be certain times where it's not appropriate. And then again, the caffeine component, it's better to have it not contain caffeine if you're using it for a health benefit, because it's better to, just get the properties of the green tea itself.
That's interesting.
Oh, the extract.
Yes.
One final one, Dr. Cooper, and you've talked about this before. Soluble fiber does have some benefits, right? I mean, it helps control appetite. It helps prevent fat absorption, I guess, a little bit. But talk about the role that soluble fiber plays in this whole idea.
The main benefit of soluble fiber is really the microbiome, improving the health of our gut flora, which then leads to improvements in our LDL cholesterol levels. And it's a really easy thing to get in your diet with just eating oats or barley. Things that contain oats and barley are the best sources probably of soluble fiber. So I don't see why people would need to take a separate supplement, but you could. And that's also psyllium has soluble fiber. So some cardiologists recommend taking psyllium for elevated LDL levels. And so if you're a person that can't stand the dietary soluble fiber, I guess you could take a psyllium supplement if you're trying to get that type of health benefit from it. So I think that's less harmful than some of the other supplements. And it's the same thing with, should we take vitamin D, like the basic things, a multivitamin. It's real confusing of whether we should or shouldn't take some of these things. And there have been studies looking at things like vitamin A and vitamin E and showing that in a supplement form, it can be detrimental to some aspects of health. But in the diet, if you consume that same amount in your diet, it's not, because it comes in a different type of complex in our diet that it's more protected from having that type of impact. So again, I feel like keeping the supplement list very short, very small and targeted to the individual, having the certification that shows it's, quote, third party tested or GMP certified, that's really the best. And then having your diet really varied with lots of nutrient rich foods like produce, tons of I always tell people just eat lots of produce, as much produce as you can, whole grains, beans, legumes, fish. And that's really the basis of that healthful diet that targets our metabolism. So that's why there's so many like widespread additional health impact throughout our body.
And here's a pro tip. If you're not like a super, produce consumer, get a high quality blender. And what I love to do is I'll throw some Swiss chard or kale or other sorts of even beet greens, and I'll put it into a morning smoothie and put a little protein powder, put a little olive oil in there, something like that. And you can get so many nutrients, and it actually tastes pretty good. So you don't have to be like, eating your, greens that have been wilted in the pan or whatever. Yeah, just throw them in your morning smoothie.
There's so many ways to get them. But the other thing to think about too is supplements in the form of things like protein powders, and then, there's cinnamon. So if you think of diabetes, people are all taking berberine, cinnamon, and bitter melon, lots of other things. But one thing we have to really watch out for is also heavy metals in protein powders and cinnamon. And they're finding quite a bit of cadmium and lead and things like that in these supplements too.
Wow.
So we've got to be careful with anything that's processed like that. It's probably better to get cinnamon sticks and use those, or with the protein powders, really investigating if they are also third-party tested, because it seems like a food, so you wouldn't think of it as a supplement, but it technically is a supplement, and so it should also have some documentation with the company saying that it is tested for heavy metals and make sure that it's not contaminated.
I want to hit one more thing before we wrap things up. Some of you may not know, Andrea is a marketing guru. She worked in marketing at some of the biggest media companies in the world. As I look at how these supplements are advertised, Andrea, the most successful ones seem to be the ones that play on our vulnerabilities as human beings. The hair loss supplements, the testosterone supplements, the ones that promise to burn fat are playing on our fears of not having a body that looks good enough. And you're a consumer of all this stuff too, but I would just love your perspective on that, Andrea.
Well, anything that has a vulnerability, that's what's easier to market to, because marketing is an emotional purchase. You play on an emotional purchase type of situation. So wherever somebody's emotional vulnerability is, that's where you have an opening, so to speak. So that's where you create a product, because that's where you see a need, and that's where you can make money. So you're not going to make money at something where everybody feels safe and secure and doesn't need something. So you create a product where somebody wants something. If everybody felt confident, secure, healthy, and beautiful, they don't need anything. They don't want anything. They don't need anything. So nobody cares. But if you feel like, oh, I want to look better, I want to look thinner, I want more hair, I want more, I want to be sexier, I want whatever. Well, there you go. So that's why there are all those products. And packaging, obviously, everybody's competing. Like in a store, you're competing for shelf space. So people like me who are suckers for packaging look at it and go, ooh, that one's pretty. That one says, lose weight fast or whatever. So I'm like, oh, I want that. But, then you get smart and you're like, wait a minute, this can't be. You can't lose 25 pounds overnight, even though I want to.
Yeah.
But, and then that's where the celebrity spokespeople come in, because you think, oh, can I be like Kourtney Kardashian? She looks so cute. My issue, seriously, it's not about anybody. You make money the way you want to make money or whatever. But my issue is with the vulnerability of the audience, when it comes to health, that's where I get really upset, because I'm like, you're telling people not to go to a doctor and to just buy a pill. That's not good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And some of these things that are marketed as improving your metabolism, they actually could have
harmful.
Well, yeah, not just harmful, but they also could have elements and compounds in them that actually cause detrimental impact on your metabolism. For example, a lot of the antioxidants, I mean, we love antioxidants, but again, we can get antioxidants from our food. Again, produce is one of the best sources. But antioxidants, if taken in large amounts, which supplements often contain, can suppress our leptin levels quite a bit. So, if one of the things that's happened to you from lots of diets is that your leptin has become suppressed, remember when leptin's suppressed, it acts as a biologic weight defender, because it's making the body fat release an amount of a hormone, leptin, that is supposed to inform your brain and the rest of your body of what your weight is. But with diets, that leptin, the body fat stops releasing that as much, so it becomes suppressed. So there ends up being a perception that your weight is too low by your brain. Then if you take a bunch of antioxidants, it's suppressing it further. So not only will you not lose weight, but you could end up causing more weight gain by doing that. So again, this is why it's important to have a doctor who's looking at your lab work and looking at your supplements, helping explain to you, hopefully, or do your own research to find out, is it really that I need to take more antioxidants than what's in like 3 wheelbarrows of tomatoes or something? Or could that possibly cause some secondary problem that's going to come back and bite me? So that's just the other aspect of these supplements, is that often they're marketed as, improving something when it actually is going to cause that problem. We see this a lot with things marketed for, quote, leptin resistance. Leptin resistance is another buzzword that people use, and there's supplements out there marketed for that and diets out there. And when I've looked at them, they're the very things that would make it worse. So I don't really get it.
Well, this has been enlightening, and I think to be continued, but buyer beware. And as you said, Dr. Cooper, check with your physician before you launch into this stuff, and just try to resist that emotional response that the marketers are so good at creating. All right, this has been another edition of Fat Science.
No diets, no agendas, just science that makes you feel better.
I'm Mark Wright. Thanks for listening to Fat Science with Dr. Emily Cooper, a Work P2P production. New episodes drop every Monday. If you've enjoyed the conversation, subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. This production is for informational purposes only and is not intended to replace professional medical advice. Join us next week for another episode dedicated to the science of why we get fat. No diets, no agendas, just science that makes you feel better.